what's maybe the top two things that your clients come to you with and are just need the most help on? Like, what is it that they're doing wrong?
Oh boy. Well, I think I mentioned very early in the conversation the whole idea of cliche and, just starting poorly. One of the things a lot of writers do, and they don't realize what they're doing when they do it, is they start writing the background. In other words, okay, here's all the stuff that you needed to do in planning, but they leave it in the book. A lot of times it sort of shocks people when I cut out the first 3 chapters. And, and it's not my decision. I shouldn't put it that way. I don't cut it out. I go, you probably want to start in the 4th chapter instead of the first one, because all this other stuff is just, backstory, and it's not really something that you need to even put in the book. The story starts where this particular action happens, and that's like where you want to grab the reader, where you want to pull them in. That, I guess, is the other half of the answer to that question, is people are not concentrating on pulling the reader in. You mentioned, and it's one of my favorites, waking up. It almost suggests that the reader should be sleeping. And or the reader goes to bed or whatever. Anything that's inactive, this is another one of my pet peeves, is inactive action. People will describe somebody saying something, and then instead of just saying Joe said, they'll say Joe raised his eyebrows, and it means nothing. Joe raised his eyebrows because of what? He's reacting to something that somebody said, but you don't know whether a raised eyebrows are surprise. You don't know exactly what the raised eyebrows mean. So people skip over a lot of the attention to detail that they really need in a book. The attention, a lot of times, one of the funnier things I think that happens is people write up, like they're writing all this stuff that doesn't really say anything, casual conversations or people saying please and thank you, and the dialogue isn't really very interesting. And then they get up to an interesting point, there's going to be action happening, they've led up to it, and then they skip over it. They just summarize it in a sentence, and the action's over, and you're like, oh, well, like, no, do it the opposite way. Show me the action. Show me what show me what the story is that you're telling. Don't just tell me.
Too much detail in the wrong place. So telling when you should be showing, and showing when you should be telling.
Well, but that's a really critical point that a lot of people don't get. Show, don't tell is, don't beat the reader over the head with it. Let them experience, read any good writer. You're experiencing the story. You're watching the action unfold. You're allowed to imagine it yourself. The other thing about details, which I'll bring up, which is sort of funny, is, people think, and I say details, right? And they think, oh, okay, well, you need to know that it's a red car. Well, no, I don't need to know that it's a red car, because unless that car being red is important to the story, it's got nothing to do with it. Leave it out.
Wow.
It's a smaller version of a red herring, if that means anything to anyone.
Yeah, because the reader's reading it and thinking, oh, the author took the time to mention that this is a red car, and then later on they're like, oh, well, it turned out it was never important. They really want me to know that the car is red. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different version of raised eyebrows and all the stuff just all the stuff that doesn't matter. Leave it out. Well, don't leave it out. Write it down the first time, and then when you go back to read your own things, that's when you start looking at it and going, all right, this doesn't say anything. Cross it out. That's pretty much my job.
So what's another pet peeve of yours that is fairly common?
Oh boy. That's sort of funny. I'm coming up blank right at this moment, because I just ran through 3 or 4 of them.
Well, don't worry then.
Well, no, the way the dialogue is sometimes happens with where people think that they always need to tell you, the emotion of the person speaking. For example, Josh shrieked, or it's not that important. If the context of what is going on is done correctly, if the action leading up to what the person is saying tells you what the situation is, and it should, you don't have to label everything as far as, he said, she said is a fine thing. Oh, and that's the other thing that people do that is a little bit of a pet peeve is they do not tell you who's speaking. Like they'll have, an exchange where there's just dialogue for 2 or 3 pages and it's one person talking, there's only 2 people, maybe 3 people in a room, but you never know who's talking because they don't say Joe said, Sally said, they leave all that out. And it's just dialogue and you're like, okay, I don't even know who's talking now.